If you haven't seen the Netflix show Tiger King, you should at least watch some clips from it. And I want to show you a video from Tiger King just so that you can see how interesting it is, how it is like a train crash. You don't want to watch, but you can't look away because all of the characters are just too ridiculous. One of the characters in the video I'm going to show you, his name is Joe Exotic. That's not his real name, but he calls himself Joe Exotic because he is the owner of a private zoo that has hundreds of tigers. People can come and play with tigers and bears, and a lot of people criticize him because he's such a crazy figure. He walks around with guns, he has a limp, he's gay, he has 2 husbands, he shoots his pond, and he shoots things all the time, and he has a bunch of tigers. There's this lady he hates. The lady he hates is called Carol Baskin. She owns another park that's supposed to be saving tigers. At least she says that it's supposed to be saving tigers. But Joe Exotic doesn't think so. He thinks that she's doing what he's doing, only worse. And in fact, he thinks that she killed her husband because there's some evidence to suggest that she may have. So we're going to take a look at this clip. We're going to try to understand it. After we watch it, then we'll look at some English expressions that we can pull out of it, that we can learn from Joe Exotic. So let's take a look.
You know, first of all, I'd like to put this out there for all of Carol Baskin and Big Cat Rescue's fans, supporters, and people who dig in their pockets to give them money to care for their cats. Approximately in the early year of 2011, Carol Baskin filed a lawsuit on me for copyright for some stupid rabbit picture of her staff with dead rabbits. And it seemed to piss her off enough that she went and copyrighted the picture and then filed a lawsuit against me. And unfortunately, I didn't have the money to waste on lawsuits to follow through with it in court. So she got $1 million judgment against me, which is no big deal. I'll never have $1 million in my life. The question that I have today, though, is for years she has been exploiting me on her cubabuse.com, 911abuse.com, and all of her other websites, saying that I'm this big abuser of tigers, and I breed tigers and I use tiger cubs for petting and promoting, which is extremely dangerous. Well, back in 2013, I filed bankruptcy, and her lawyers in bankruptcy court abandoned 50 tigers back in my care. The question is if I'm such an abuser for tigers, why did they put 50 tigers back in my care? Here recently, she has spent over $500,000 keeping me in court and trying to collect on $1 million settlement that is never going to happen. First of all, you got to be smart enough to know that when a man ain't got $1 million, it's time to pull the plug and call it quits. But she's spending your hard-earned money, and she's spending the donations that you give to them animals in order to keep harassing me. This has already been in court in Oklahoma for over 2 years, spending all that money, that we could both take care of our animals a little bit better and let bygones be bygones. Here recently, I offered her a $500,000 life insurance policy, $1,000 a month, and I myself would quit cub petting and quit breeding within 2 years of her accepting my offer. Now, if this was really about cub petting and breeding tigers, she would be smart enough, you would think, to know that this is going to be in court for 2 more years. So I could literally put myself out of the cub breeding business and the cub petting business if she would just accept that offer and go away. Everyone knows recently that I've been diagnosed with CVID, which is an immune deficiency disease that there is no cure for. I have to be very careful about coming up with infections and everything else so I don't go back into kidney and liver failure and other major organ failure. I don't have time for the drama, and I don't have time for the court battles or anything else. But let's just ask Carol Baskin, up front and honestly, what is this really about? Are you that obsessed with Joe Exotic? Or are you making that much money off of exploiting some man for being an animal abuser who's not really an animal abuser? Because my first question would be, if he was an animal abuser, why in the hell would you leave 50 tigers in his care when you had the opportunity to take them? I'm Joe Exotic, and it's time the truth comes out.
So that's it. That's Joe Exotic. This is the main character of Tiger King. Now, he does all kinds of crazy stuff. This video makes him look like kind of a normal person. Why? Well, he's really trying to criticize one person, complain about something that happened to him, and make himself look like he's the vulnerable one. He's trying to get sympathy. He talks about the disease he has, which I believe he really does have. He talks about how he had to file bankruptcy, and we'll talk about what these words mean, but this video makes him look like kind of a normal person. If you watch the show, you will see he's kind of not a normal person. He's very interesting, and he has some good characteristics, and a lot of people seem to like him, but he also has some pretty bad characteristics. It doesn't seem like any single character on the show is really a good person. At least that's what my impression was when I watched this show, and I watched the whole thing in one day. When you watch something in one day because you can't look away and you can't stop, episode after episode, it's called binge watching. And I think this show is very bingeable. All right, so let's talk about a few of the words that he mentions. Now, you might have a difficult time understanding him because he has a bit of an accent. It's kind of a southern, close to a Texas accent. We can call it a Texan drawl. Now, actually, he's from Oklahoma, which is just north of Texas, but he has that sort of Texas accent, and so when he speaks, it sounds kind of informal, and it sounds like a sort of southern Texas accent. Now, he says a couple of key words. One is lawsuit, and he also says copyright. Now, lawsuit is when one person sues another person in court. Anytime that happens, usually it's a civil case, we call that a lawsuit. Someone has done something against another person. One person wants to get money from them. Now, in this case, he's talking about copyright. Copyright is when someone says, this is my intellectual property, this picture that I made, or this logo that I made, or whatever it is. You used it, and I didn't give you permission. That is a copyright violation. A copyright violation. Okay, so then there's a lawsuit, and I get money from you. In this case, the judgment, after the whole lawsuit happens, there's a judgment. The judgment was that Joe Exotic had to pay Carol Baskin, who had the copyright, $1 million. But he doesn't have $1 million. He says, I will never have $1 million in my whole life. Okay, so he's saying, I have no way to pay this. You're crazy for thinking I'm going to be able to pay this. It's crazy for you to even insist that I pay it. And then he talks about later how he offered to give her $1,000 a month. Now, the other key word that you'll hear there is the word abuser. She calls me an abuser. Everyone's calling me an abuser, an animal abuser. Remember, he owns hundreds of tigers. Well, not anymore. Spoiler alert, he's in jail now. But people have called him an abuser, and he's saying, how can you call me an abuser? That means someone who treats someone poorly, or treats, in this case, animals poorly. How can you call me that if you're the one who gave me 50 tigers to take care of? He's saying he's not an abuser, and that he was wrongly accused of being an abuser. The basic word here is abuse. This is the noun form, abuse. You can have abuse for people. You can also have animal abuse. Now, he also talks about bankruptcy. He talks about filing for bankruptcy. What does that mean? This is usually when you're in a bad financial situation. You're in major debt. You can't pay off your debts. You can't pay off your loans, right? You don't have enough money. And so you can go through a legal process of alleviating that and getting rid of a lot of the debt so that you don't have a complete financial disaster. It's called filing for bankruptcy. And he talks about doing that. Now, he also uses the word harass. Harass is when someone bothers another person, when they ask a person maybe a lot of questions, or maybe they say mean things about them online, whatever it may be. To harass someone is usually not physical. Usually it's verbal, criticizing someone. If someone is in the comments telling me how stupid my hair is, that might be harassment. You're harassing me, telling me how stupid my hair is. Yes, I cut it by myself. I know, it looks silly, but you don't have to harass me about it, right? I can't go to the barber right now. I'm on lockdown. Stop harassing me. Now, no one's actually doing that, but you could. You could if you want to, and I wouldn't actually blame you. Another phrase that he uses, a very interesting one, is let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones. What does that mean? Well, it's similar to the expression water under the bridge. Water under the bridge is when there was a conflict between us, we had a disagreement, we fought, whatever it may be, and then finally it's time to just let it go. You know, just let the water run under the bridge. We say water under the bridge. The past is the past. Let's just forget about it. Let's start over. We also say let bygones be bygones. Now, one of the other things he says to try to get sympathy, it's a true thing, I think, but the thing he says to get sympathy is, I have this disease. There's no cure. There's no cure. He wants people to feel bad for him, right? This is a diagnosis. He says, I was diagnosed with this disease. Diagnosis is when the doctor says, you have this. Maybe after they test you, they do a lot of things, and they say, you've got this. You've got this. So he's been diagnosed. Now, why is he doing this video? Maybe it's to try to get her to stop harassing him or other people to stop harassing him, to get her to stop asking for the $1 million that she says she deserves because she won the judgment in court. Whatever it may be, he's trying to use maybe his diagnosis as a way to get sympathy, to get that to happen, to make the harassment stop. Now, the last thing I want to mention is he says, why in the hell would you give me 50 tigers? This is a common expression that we use. When we can't believe something happened, we say, why in the hell would I do that? Sometimes we say, why in the hell? Or we just say, why the hell? Why the hell would you give me 50 tigers if you think I'm an animal abuser? If you think I'm an animal abuser, why would you give me animals to take care of? I must not be, otherwise you wouldn't have given me those animals, right? Why the hell would you do that? Unless you trusted me. So that's kind of what he's saying. It's actually a very, very common expression. So hopefully all of those expressions are clear. I encourage you to go check out the show. It's really interesting. It is like a train wreck. It's hard to look away from, but I think it shows an interesting part of American culture, even though, yeah, it is a little bit extreme, but it's pretty interesting. By the way, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button. That would be great. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my courses in the links in the description.